This is a scan of the front page of a newspaper printed in Boston on September 25, 1690. It features 3 dense columns of text, and it is the single surviving physical copy of the first American newspaper. In the 4th paragraph of the first column, the publisher explicitly lays out his thesis. He writes that the paper exists so that memorable occurrence of divine providence may not be neglected or forgotten. Moving down to the 6th paragraph, the editorial mandate becomes aggressive. The publisher states his goal is to establish an objective record to assist in the curing, or at least the charming, of that spirit of lying currently plaguing the colony. He even issues a direct threat to his neighbors. In the final paragraph of this column, he promises to track down and publicly expose the first raiser of any malicious false reports. This localized attempt to combat rumors and establish documented truth survived exactly 1 day. By September 26th, the colonial government had effectively suppressed the publication. A publication dedicated entirely to verifying facts and exposing liars was immediately targeted and destroyed for doing exactly what it promised to do. This map illustrates the geopolitical reality of 1690 New England. Nova Anglia was a fragile English foothold, deeply isolated and surrounded by competing French forces in Nova Francia and heavily armed indigenous territories. Inside those borders, the Massachusetts Bay Colony was fracturing under the immense strain of active warfare, rolling epidemics, and intense religious paranoia. Against that backdrop, this single issue of Publick Occurrences functions as an unfiltered dataset of colonial trauma. To understand what panicked the government so badly, we have to look at the specific segments the colonists actually read that Thursday morning. For a Puritan, these reports functioned as active theological evidence. To read the news was to attempt a decoding of God's violent judgments on their society. The broadcast starts with positive news. In the second column, Christianized Indians in Plymouth hold a thanksgiving for a comfortable harvest. But immediately below, the tone shifts. The text details epidemical fevers and a severe smallpox outbreak raging through Boston. This chart illustrates the staggering scale of the crisis, using a specific metric from the paper. On a single Sunday, in one congregation, there were bills desiring prayers for above 100 sick individuals. The reporting moves from physical disease to a case study in colonial mental health, detailing a recent suicide in Watertown. The publisher writes that a recently widowed man fell into severe clinical depression and explicitly states that the devil took advantage of his grief. The paper prints the exact tragic details. The recently widowed man slipped away from watchful friends into a dark cowhouse and hanged himself. In the 1690 colonial framework, an epidemic, a suicide, and demonic interference were all treated as interconnected symptoms of the same spiritual disease. The paper reports on a series of devastating fires near the South Meeting House, reducing critical housing to ash in the middle of the night. This section records a young man who perished in the flames because he lost his keys. It also notes a massive piece of collateral damage, the destruction of the best furnished printing press in America. This is a diagram of the complex mechanics of a 17th century printing press. Building or importing one required immense capital and specialized labor, making its destruction a nearly permanent setback. Losing that press crippled the colony's ability to disseminate official orders or coordinate mass responses during a period of rolling, overlapping crises. The centerpiece of the paper covers the disastrous Western expedition against Canada. The text documents a severe logistical failure by General Winthrop, specifically noting that the canoes required to cross the lake were not prepared. It reports that indigenous allies failed to arrive, blaming a smallpox outbreak, a claim the publisher openly dismisses as an excuse. The news then shifts to the brutal frontier, printing accounts from escaped English captives. They provided horrific details about English commander Captain Mason, who unprovokedly cut the faces and ripped the bellies of indigenous men. In mathematically precise retaliation, indigenous forces reportedly butchered 40 English captives they held in reserve. Finally, the paper printed a highly volatile rumor suggesting that indigenous nations allied with the French might be revolting against their commanders. By documenting logistical failures and sensitive rumors, the publisher converted a local news sheet into a direct threat to the colony's military stability. Just 4 days after the ink dried on that single issue, the Massachusetts government moved to erase it. This is the official broadside issued by the governor and council, drafted explicitly to ban the newspaper and criminalize its distribution. The state justified its censorship by arguing that the paper was printed without authority and contained reflections of a very high nature.
We know exactly what triggered the ban, thanks to the private diary of Judge Samuel Sewall, a prominent member of the colonial elite. Sewall wrote that the publication gave much distaste, specifically because it printed those unauthorized rumors regarding the Maquas and the French king, a diplomatic vulnerability the English crown could not afford to have publicized. The government recognized that an independent press acted as an uncontrollable mechanism capable of undermining their political and military authority. The censorship campaign was ruthlessly efficient. Authorities systematically hunted down and destroyed every single copy of the paper circulating in the colony. It took over a century and a half before a solitary surviving copy was discovered, misfiled among colonial state papers in this London record office. When the next American newspaper, the Boston Newsletter, launched 14 years later, it survived by submitting completely to strict government licensing. Publick Occurrences failed precisely because it attempted to establish an objective baseline of facts in an era that demanded absolute obedience to the state narrative. The very first act of American journalism triggered the first act of American censorship. In a single day, the colony established the boundaries of what the state would allow the public to know.
The Daily Dispatch